In the dead of night, specifically on June 21, 2025, the world bore witness to an event that would irrevocably reshape the understanding of conflict in the Middle East. A ballistic missile, launched from Iranian territory, managed to penetrate Israel's formidable Iron Dome missile defense system and struck the heart of Tel Aviv. This marked a chilling first. An Iranian missile not only reached Israeli soil but also directly impacted a densely populated urban area, leaving behind a trail of catastrophic devastation. According to the most recent figures released by the Israeli Ministry of Health, over 3,000 individuals sustained injuries, 16 precious lives were lost, and scores of buildings were reduced to rubble. The areas of Bat Yam, Ramat Gan, and Tikva found themselves at the very epicenter of this devastating attack. It was in this area that the missile detonated between two residential complexes, creating a domino effect of destruction. Building facades crumbled, raging fires erupted, and critical power and communication lines were severed. A wave of sheer panic gripped the streets as people desperately sought shelter, but for far too many, time simply ran out. Surveillance cameras captured the horrific moment of impact, showing glass storefronts shattering into a million pieces, a cloud of dust and debris billowing into the air, followed by a deafening thud and the piercing wail of air raid sirens. However, it wasn't merely the devastating strike itself that captivated the world's attention, it was the reaction of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. During a live broadcast intended to address measures for ensuring national security, the sound of the explosion reverberated behind him. The camera, unfortunately, continued to roll, capturing the Prime Minister's face as it paled, his voice faltered, and his eyes momentarily glazed over with shock. This single, raw image was instantly disseminated across the globe. Hours later, he reappeared before the press, but instead of reassuring the nation about their safety, he unexpectedly lamented a personal inconvenience. His son had once again postponed his wedding due to the escalating conflict. These words sent shockwaves not only through Israeli society but also far beyond its borders. Social media platforms exploded with accusations of callous indifference to the suffering of ordinary citizens, as the nation's leader seemed more concerned with a private family matter than the unfolding national catastrophe. It was an egregious display of perceived tone deafness that ignited public outrage. Simultaneously, municipal emergency services were plunged into utter chaos. Firefighters were stretched to their absolute limit, struggling to contain the numerous fires that had engulfed the stricken buildings. At the site of the devastation, countless rescue operations were underway as emergency responders desperately searched for survivors trapped beneath the wreckage. Many of the injured were transported to hospitals in critical condition. Hundreds of families were evacuated and temporarily housed in schools and sports arenas, hastily converted into makeshift relief centers. The tragedy in Tel Aviv, however, represents more than just a localized attack. It is the consequence of a strategic miscalculation, a stark and brutal reminder of the ever-present dangers lurking in the complex geopolitical landscape of the Middle East. It was a day that fear took over the streets. The chain of events was set in motion in the days preceding the calamitous strike. Despite ongoing peace accord negotiations in Washington, the Israeli Air Force launched a daring assault on an Iranian research facility, purportedly linked to the nation's nuclear program. According to reports from both The Guardian and Al Jazeera, this particular site was under the watchful eye of the International Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA. This attack, therefore, represented a blatant violation of all existing agreements and protocols, a deeply concerning escalation that reverberated across the international community. Iran's response was swift and decisive, a fiery riposte that left no room for ambiguity. The launch of a barrage of ballistic missiles formed the core of Operation Revenge for Kermanshah, a title imbued with significance, referencing the Iranian province previously targeted by Israeli-manufactured drones. As reported by Reuters, the launch originated from a mobile platform strategically positioned in eastern Iran, near the city of Tabriz. The missile traversed a distance exceeding 800 kilometers, audaciously violating the airspace of both Iraq and Jordan. Astonishingly, according to satellite data, the air defense systems of allied nations made no attempt to intercept the incoming projectile. This glaring omission led analysts to speculate that Iran had astutely capitalized on a moment when the United States and NATO were primarily focused on the conflict in Ukraine and Eastern Europe. Despite official declarations of support for Israel emanating from the White House, the United States, in practice, proved either unable or unwilling to intervene in the unfolding crisis. President Donald Trump, while affirming Israel's right to self-defense, also issued a veiled warning, suggesting that Tel Aviv must bear the responsibility for the consequences of its own decisions, a clear indication of disapproval towards the escalating tensions. As evening descended, military experts engaged in intense discussions regarding the unprecedented penetration of Israel's vaunted Iron Dome defense system. According to the Israeli newspaper Haaretz, the air defense system was overwhelmed by a deluge of decoy targets launched a mere 3 minutes prior to the actual strike. This revelation underscored the meticulous planning behind Iran's operation, highlighting the sophisticated use of diversionary tactics. An analyst from the Center for Strategic Studies in Jerusalem summarily acknowledged, "No one anticipated this level of coordination and precision from Iran, a testament to the evolving capabilities of the Iranian military." The immediate aftermath of the attack was nothing short of catastrophic. 65 buildings lay in ruins, dozens of vehicles were engulfed in flames, and entire urban districts were plunged into darkness, deprived of electricity. Within the subsequent 12 hours, delegations from the United Nations, the Red Cross, and humanitarian organizations from the European Union descended upon Tel Aviv, although Israeli authorities conspicuously attempted to restrict access to the epicenter of the devastation. However, despite these efforts, harrowing videos captured by local residents managed to leak into the media, painting a grim picture of burning facades, crushed vehicles, and streets blanketed in ash and shattered glass, a visceral depiction of the human cost of the conflict. Thus, the attack of June 21 transcended the realm of a mere military action. It metamorphosed into a potent symbol, signifying a palpable shift in the balance of power in the Middle East, a dramatic reordering of the geopolitical landscape that would undoubtedly have far-reaching consequences. For decades, the nation had basked in a sense of invulnerability. However, overnight, a stark reality shattered this illusion. The enemy, it turned out, possessed the capability to strike not just at the periphery, but at the very core of the nation, deep within the heart of the capital, into its most fortified district. And what was perhaps most unsettling was the chilling realization that this was merely the opening salvo in what promised to be a protracted and devastating conflict. Amidst the debris-strewn streets of Tel Aviv, amidst the mangled wreckage of vehicles, and the lingering vestiges of widespread panic, a tragedy began to emerge. It was a tragedy so profound that it shook even those hardened individuals accustomed to the daily litany of casualties. In the Tikva neighborhood, on Alya Street, within the shattered remains of a residential building, rescue workers grimly unearthed the bodies of 4 individuals. They had perished when the 20th floor had catastrophically collapsed. Among the deceased was Iveta Smilovitz, an 85-year-old woman who had miraculously survived the horrors of the Holocaust. She had been a former history teacher, a dedicated community activist, and a longtime participant in the In Memory of the Victims of Genocide educational programs. The revelation of her name cast a pall of silence over Israeli society, a collective moment of grief and disbelief. This woman, who had endured the unimaginable atrocities of Auschwitz, who had rebuilt her life with resilience in Israel, and who had lovingly raised 3 grandchildren, had tragically perished in her own apartment, crushed by the impact of a direct rocket hit. This became a potent symbol of the cruel irony that pervades modern warfare. Those who had survived the unspeakable horrors of the previous century were now being obliterated in a fresh wave of violence, a cycle of destruction initiated not from the ground up, but from the top down, born of political decisions. The tragedy of the Smilovitz family, however heartbreaking, represented only one thread in the tapestry of horror that was unfolding across various regions of Israel. In the city of Tamra, situated within the northern Galilee district, on that same fateful night, another Iranian projectile obliterated a residential dwelling, claiming the lives of a family of 4, a mother, her 2 daughters, and their cousin. Amidst the shattered remnants of their home, rescue personnel painstakingly recovered children's toys, splintered furniture, and scattered books. Neighbors, gathering near the ruins, expressed their profound sorrow and bewilderment. They were innocent, they lamented. They didn't even know that Israel had initiated a new war. In Ramat Gan, a densely populated suburb of Tel Aviv, a missile impacted a residential area, triggering a raging inferno and resulting in the complete annihilation of 3 buildings. An additional 9 structures sustained partial damage. According to data released by the city's municipal authorities, a staggering 117 individuals were rendered homeless, deprived of access to essential necessities such as food and medical supplies. Emergency responders toiled relentlessly throughout the night, desperately extricating survivors from beneath the perilous rubble. Among those who were pulled from the wreckage was an 11-year-old girl, tragically orphaned, having lost both of her parents and her younger brother. Initially, Israeli media outlets attempted to downplay the magnitude of the unfolding catastrophe. However, by daybreak, an uncontainable flood of eyewitness videos began to inundate social media platforms such as Telegram, TikTok, and Facebook. One particularly harrowing video, captured on a mobile phone, documented the precise moment when a missile pierced the roof of a residential complex, a chilling testament to the indiscriminate nature of the assault. The next scene unfolds in stark terror, scores of residents fleeing in utter panic, instinctively shielding their heads, desperately seeking refuge behind vehicles and in the cold, echoing depths of underground parking garages. The digital sphere buzzed with raw, unadulterated anger, the comments sections beneath the videos overflowing with despair and accusation. They are not protecting us. We have been abandoned, one resident lamented, encapsulating the collective sentiment of betrayal. The reaction was particularly emotionally charged in Rishon LeZion, another city that had been brutally impacted by the attacks. Tragically, a missile struck a multi-story residential building, culminating in the deaths of 2 individuals and leaving 17 others wounded, their lives forever altered. Some suffered agonizing burns, while others sustained severe traumatic brain injuries. Overwhelmed and struggling to cope with the sheer scale of the disaster, volunteers from Megan David Adam reported being stretched beyond their limits. Frantic with worry, people formed long, anxious queues at mobile aid stations, desperately seeking information about the fate of their loved ones. Against this backdrop of suffering and uncertainty, a powerful wave of public protest surged forth. For the first time in a long while, the cries of dissent were not emanating from Gaza or the West Bank, but from the very heart of Israel itself. The slogans rang out with fervent conviction, "Netanyahu on trial. We don't want your war. Enough fear. Give us back our safety." Young people took to the streets of Tel Aviv, brandishing hand-painted placards that accused the government of prioritizing political ambitions above the lives and well-being of its citizens. Israeli society, which had long held a fervent belief in its own nation's invulnerability, was confronted with a brutal awakening. The kind of damage and devastation that they had only witnessed in Gaza for decades had now become their own, horrifying reality. The inherent paradox was now glaringly obvious. A nation that had for years operated under the principle of preemptive strikes, now found itself directly in the crosshairs. And the one who had previously been merely the target of aerial bombardments had now emerged as a fully fledged player on the field of military technology. The international community also amplified its criticisms. The United Nations formally demanded an independent and impartial investigation into potential violations of international humanitarian law. However, what proved most striking was the stance adopted by Turkey, Qatar, and even Indonesia. These nations not only condemned the Israeli strikes against Iran, but also openly voiced their support for Iran's right to retaliatory measures in the context of self-defense, citing principles of sovereignty and proportionality. The Al-Quds newspaper characterized the attack on Tel Aviv as a moment of balanced justice, further inflaming tensions. Addressing a conference in Tehran, Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi asserted, "We do not seek war. But if war begins from the other shore, we will respond in a manner that ensures the enemy forever remembers the consequences of their aggression." His words were met with thunderous applause within the hall and a groundswell of support across social media platforms throughout the Arab world. Thus, the victims of that fateful night were not merely reduced to statistics. Instead, they became compelling arguments in a bitter dispute over who had truly suffered from the reckless and ill-considered decisions of politicians, their pain serving as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict. Where the world once viewed Palestine with a somber sense of tragedy, it now regards Tel Aviv with a chilling sense of foreboding. Even the most fortified nation, it seems, cannot shield itself from the repercussions of transgressing established boundaries of acceptable conduct. The failure of the vaunted Iron Dome has ignited fervent debate amongst military analysts, policymakers, and the Israeli populace alike. This air defense system, a source of national pride for the Israeli state, has suffered a humiliating setback. Against the backdrop of the advanced technical specifications of Iran's latest generation of ballistic missiles, particularly the Khorramshahr-4, the Iron Dome proved incapable of intercepting the full spectrum of threats. This was particularly evident when strikes were executed in waves, incorporating decoys and countermeasures designed to saturate and overwhelm the defense network. This stark assessment is precisely how the Institute for National Security Studies in Israel characterized the situation in a report published on June 23, 2025. The document details how, within a mere 2 minutes, more than 35 aerial objects were launched towards central Israel. This barrage included ballistic missiles, kamikaze drones, and heat-seeking decoys designed to mimic the thermal signatures of genuine ordnance. The air defense system was demonstrably overloaded, its capabilities stretched beyond their limits. Out of the 11 actual ballistic missiles fired, 7 successfully reached their designated targets. Most disturbingly, a breach occurred in the heart of Tel Aviv, a region previously believed to be impervious, with comprehensive air defense coverage protecting every square meter. Eyewitness videos corroborated the grim reality. The system activated, but its performance fell short of complete neutralization. Israeli military officials contend that the densely populated urban landscape, coupled with the limited reaction time, contributed to the failure to intercept a portion of the incoming missiles. Critically, the system was not engineered to counter hypersonic velocities, which, according to emerging intelligence, Iran is now employing. Adding another layer of complexity, theories surfaced suggesting the involvement of the Fatah-2 complex. This is a purportedly hypersonic missile, capable of traversing distances exceeding 2,000 kilometers while maintaining a minimal signature in both the infrared and radar spectra. While Tehran has not officially confirmed the deployment of such advanced weaponry, a report in Jane's Defense Weekly postulates a high likelihood that Iran was actively testing a novel delivery system predicated on solid fuel propulsion technology. According to Eli Baram, a former advisor to the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, on matters of air defense, Israel is confronting a new and disconcerting reality. The former safeguards are no longer a guaranteed protection. In an op-ed published in the Jerusalem Post, he lamented, "It's as if we've been training on a firing range all this time, only to be suddenly thrust into a real war." The sense of betrayal and vulnerability within Israel was palpable. This failure of the defensive shield has triggered a surge of public distrust and anxiety. A poll conducted by Channel 12 revealed that a staggering 61% of Israelis no longer harbor confidence in the efficacy of their air defenses. The implications of this eroded faith are profound, potentially reshaping the nation's security calculus and its relationship with its neighbors. In the aftermath of the devastating strikes, a wave of discontent is sweeping through Israeli society. A significant 48% of the population are emphatically demanding the immediate resignation of the Minister of Defense, coupled with the launch of a full-fledged parliamentary inquiry. A burning question hangs in the air: where have the billions of dollars invested in the Iron Dome gone, if it demonstrably failed to safeguard even the capital city? The public's trust has been deeply shaken, leaving them feeling vulnerable and exposed. As the crisis intensified, Israel urgently requested military assistance from the United States. President Donald Trump, while in Texas meeting with the National Guard, responded by assuring that America would not abandon Israel. However, he added a crucial caveat: any military aid would be calibrated to strategic expediency. This pronouncement triggered a mixed reaction within Israel, where unconditional support from the U.S. had previously been taken for granted. The realization that aid might be contingent on strategic considerations has introduced an element of uncertainty and anxiety. Conversely, in Iran, the atmosphere was jubilant. State-controlled Arab television networks broadcast graphic footage of the aftermath of the attacks, showcasing the destruction, collapsed buildings, blazing vehicles, and frantic rescue operations. The coverage was punctuated by bold captions, "Retribution for Kermanshah." This is only the beginning. Analysts in Tehran are portraying the breach of Israel's air defense system as a watershed moment in history, exposing the vulnerability of their adversary. A sense of triumph and vindication permeated the Iranian media landscape. Simultaneously, within Israeli military circles, a frantic effort to overhaul the air defense infrastructure is underway. The David Sling system, designed to intercept medium-range rockets, is being rapidly deployed in southern regions. Nonetheless, experts caution that even this system may be overwhelmed by multi-layered, saturation attacks. Negotiations are reportedly ongoing for the acquisition of the American THAAD system, but its installation and integration will require months, a luxury that Israel may not have. The race against time is palpable. Adding to the sense of urgency, a hasty evacuation of government institutions from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem and Beersheba has commenced. According to reports in the Times of Israel, on the night of June 22, the archives of the Ministry of Defense, along with a segment of the Mossad Analytical Center, were relocated. This action underscores the authorities' profound apprehension regarding the safety of the capital region, further fueling public unease. The breach of the Iron Dome represents more than just a technological failure. It is a profound political and military humiliation that has shaken the very foundations of Israel's strategic thinking. What was once considered impenetrable has been breached. The shield of the nation has become a symbol of its vulnerability. While the military desperately searches for new solutions, the adversary has demonstrated its ability not only to strike, but also to undermine the sense of security at the very heart of the country. The psychological impact of this perceived failure is immense. Following the series of destructive attacks and the failure of the air defense system, the Israeli government attempted to seize control of not only the situation on the ground but also the information landscape, undertaking public relations initiatives to instill confidence. As the sun dipped below the horizon on June 22, 2025, a palpable sense of unease settled over the nation. From that very evening, the broadcasts of several international television channels, including Al Jazeera, Press TV, and TRT World, were abruptly curtailed. The official justification offered by the government was the dissemination of panic and the falsification of data. However, a chilling realization dawned swiftly upon the citizenry. This was a blatant attempt to conceal the true magnitude of the devastation that had befallen the country. Indeed, on that same fateful day, the Israeli Ministry of Communications issued a stark decree. It prohibited the publication of any photographs or video footage originating from the sites of missile impacts unless explicit authorization was granted by the army censor. The implications were immediately clear, and journalists from prominent publications such as Haaretz and the Times of Israel openly decried this act as censorship, a phenomenon largely absent in recent years. This heavy-handed measure ignited a fresh wave of profound distrust within the nation. Even media outlets traditionally aligned with the state began to pointedly suggest that the government was deliberately underreporting the number of fatalities and casualties. Against this backdrop of suppressed information and growing suspicion, raw, unfiltered footage captured by eyewitnesses continued to circulate through social media channels, defying governmental control. One particular video, depicting the catastrophic destruction of a high-rise building in the heart of Tel Aviv by a direct missile strike, went viral with alarming speed. The harrowing soundtrack of the video, the screams of children, the fervent prayers of women, and the inferno of burning vehicles below, amplified the horror. This single piece of citizen journalism garnered over 40 million views within the first 12 hours. Despite the frantic efforts of Israeli authorities to expunge it from the national internet domain, the video was immediately picked up by international news organizations, including France 24, Al Arabiya, RT, and The Independent. The political repercussions were not long in coming. Heated debates erupted within the Knesset, focusing on the question of accountability for the defense failures and the substantial loss of civilian life. The opposition parties vociferously demanded the establishment of an independent parliamentary commission to investigate the actions of the Netanyahu government during the period from June 15 to June 21. This time frame, they argued, was critical as it encompassed the period when strikes were initiated against Iranian targets, which in turn served as the catalyst for the devastating retaliatory attacks. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Netanyahu remained steadfast in his conviction regarding the imperative of confronting the Iranian threat. He continued to vehemently accuse Tehran of sponsoring terrorism and promising a severe and decisive response. Nevertheless, within the corridors of power, a growing chorus of voices advocated for restraint. Justice Minister Yuli Edelstein articulated this sentiment, stating, "We cannot wage a war on two fronts, against rockets and against our own citizens." Adding to the pressure, a public opinion poll conducted by the newspaper Ma'ariv revealed that a substantial 62% of citizens believed the country should initiate negotiations, potentially with the mediation of Turkey or the United Nations. Furthermore, Israel found itself in an increasingly precarious position on the international stage. While unwavering support from Washington remained, a growing number of Western nations began to distance themselves. Germany, France, and Spain issued statements urging Israel to refrain from any actions that could lead to further escalation of the already volatile situation. The sense of isolation was palpable, amplifying the internal turmoil and fueling the growing sense of crisis. The situation was rapidly deteriorating. The Brazilian Minister of Foreign Affairs directly accused Tel Aviv of undermining regional stability, a stern rebuke that resonated globally. Even India, traditionally an ally of Israel, adopted a neutral stance, issuing a plea for restraint from all parties involved. This cautious response spoke volumes about the shifting diplomatic landscape. However, the reactions from Turkey and Malaysia were notably more severe. President Erdogan, during a passionate address in Ankara, proclaimed, "We are witnessing a nation, once considering itself untouchable, now enduring the pain it has inflicted upon others for years." His words were laced with a palpable sense of condemnation. Simultaneously, in Jakarta, fervent protests erupted outside the Israeli embassy, with demonstrators vociferously demanding an end to the blockade of Gaza and denouncing the attack on Iran. The atmosphere was charged with anger and frustration. Israel's attempts to divert attention towards the perceived threat from Iran were increasingly viewed as a transparent effort to evade responsibility for its provocative strikes. International analysts from both AS and SI's group issued statements, emphasizing the counterproductive nature of Israel's actions. Israel's decision to attack the research center in Bushehr, especially amidst ongoing peace negotiations, was illogical and utterly irresponsible, as it directly incited a retaliatory strike against civilian populations, they asserted. The analysts underscored the devastating consequences of such a reckless move. Against this backdrop of international condemnation and escalating tensions, the first fissures began to appear within the Israeli power structure. General Tomer Bar, the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, tendered his resignation, declaring that he could no longer serve under political directives that disregarded established defense doctrine. His departure sent shockwaves through the military establishment. Subsequently, two deputy defense ministers submitted requests for temporary suspension of their duties. These developments collectively pointed to a profound crisis within the very core of the national security apparatus. The foundation of Israeli defense seemed to be crumbling. In parallel, public pressure was mounting relentlessly. Daily protests were taking place at the Knesset, the Tel Aviv City Hall, and the Ministry of Defense. The air crackled with angry slogans, "We are not targets, give us back the truth, where was the army?" The protests were particularly intense in Ramat Gan and Bat Yam, where the impact of the strike had resulted in the most extensive destruction of homes. The grief and outrage were palpable. Thus, the Iranian strike became not only a military event, but also an informational, political, and moral earthquake. Israel found itself in a precarious situation, with the state apparatus seemingly unable to manage the fallout from its own decisions, and the citizenry struggling to cope with the consequences of their silence. While society demanded answers and the world called for de-escalation, the government offered only justifications, their voices drowned out by the wailing of sirens and the sorrow echoing through the streets of the devastated cities. Adding to the military and political setbacks, Israel confronted consequences that had been long ignored within the corridors of power: economic collapse and strategic paralysis. Tel Aviv, previously a symbol of prosperity and innovation, now resembled a city reeling from a major catastrophe. The vibrant metropolis was now a somber reflection of the devastating choices made by its leaders. The financial district in Dizengoff Tzedek, the vibrant heartland of Israel's burgeoning tech scene and home to the offices of its most prominent startups, venture capital firms, and multinational technology corporations, suffered greatly from the nearby explosions. The very air crackled with tension as shattered storefronts, the charred remains of incinerated vehicles, intermittent power outages, and palpable panic gripping the workforce painted a grim picture of devastation. According to a report by Bloomberg, a staggering sum exceeding $28 billion of private capital hastily fled Israel in the agonizing 72 hours following the initial assault. This capital flight marked the most significant exodus in the last 15 years, a truly alarming indicator of the economic impact. Adding to the turmoil, the share prices of companies listed on the TA-125 index plummeted by a terrifying 11.6%, representing the most precipitous decline since the dark days of 2020. On June 24, 2025, the stock exchange trading day was abruptly halted, a measure not seen since the disruptive onset of the COVID-19 pandemic. The high-tech sector, the crown jewel of the Israeli economy, bore the brunt of the damage. Flagship companies such as Mobileye, Nice Systems, and Monday.com announced the temporary cessation of operations in their central Tel Aviv offices, sending shockwaves through the industry. The offices of tech giants Intel and Nvidia were partially evacuated as a precautionary measure. Furthermore, Amazon Web Services, AWS, which operates a crucial data center in the suburb of Petah Tikva, made the difficult decision to temporarily restrict access to its Israeli servers, further complicating matters. Moody's, the renowned credit rating agency, estimated that the disruption to the IT infrastructure alone resulted in losses exceeding $480 million in a mere 48 hours, a truly staggering figure. Compounding the already dire situation, international partners began to distance themselves from collaborative ventures, a move that cut deep. Investors hailing from Japan, South Korea, and Germany announced the temporary suspension of their participation in programs related to innovation and Israel's defense industry, casting a shadow of uncertainty over future collaborations. Vertex Ventures, one of Singapore's largest venture capital funds, made the painful decision to withdraw $120 million in committed funding from an Israeli biotechnology startup, delivering a crushing blow to the promising venture. The European Investment Bank followed suit, pausing loans earmarked for infrastructure development in the vicinity of Ben Gurion Airport, hindering crucial expansion plans. Logistics were simultaneously paralyzed, further strangling the economy. Container ships operated by Maersk, CMA CGM, and MSC, vital arteries of international trade, ceased calling at the port of Ashdod II, the second largest port after Haifa. The reason? The heightened risk of missile attacks, which now extended along the entire coastline, making navigation perilous. International insurance companies, including the esteemed Lloyd's of London, refused to provide coverage for shipping risks in Israeli territorial waters, effectively imposing a blockade. The inevitable consequences included fuel shortages, delays in food deliveries, and a sharp increase in domestic prices, further exacerbating the hardships faced by ordinary citizens. The devastating impact on the Sarona market, a popular shopping and exhibition center, seized the attention of the global media, as the destruction of its central gallery became a poignant symbol of the crisis. The center, long considered a showcase of Israel's modern economy and vibrant culture, transformed into a haunting emblem of collapse. Images of the smoldering debris, the charred remains of boutiques, and the ruined restaurants flooded the international press, serving as a stark reminder of the profound cost of the conflict and leaving the world in stunned disbelief. Against this disquieting backdrop, the Israeli Minister of Tourism resigned, citing the impossibility of fulfilling his duties in the face of devastated infrastructure and an alarming lack of security. This resignation underscored the profound crisis gripping the nation. Experts have begun to suggest that the economic blow delivered may prove even more effective than the impact of the rockets themselves. After all, while military installations can be reconstructed and modernized, the erosion of trust, particularly among international businesses, requires years to rebuild. In Israel, discussions have commenced regarding the establishment of an anti-crisis fund to bolster businesses. However, given the escalating budget deficit, such measures appear largely symbolic, offering little substantive relief. The attack also exerted significant, far-reaching consequences upon strategic assets. Facilities belonging to Native, the Center for Cyber Intelligence and Strategic Planning, suffered debilitating communication outages. Consequently, certain analytical centers were compelled to relocate their operations, some to Jerusalem and others even as far as Limassol, Cyprus, where backup servers are housed. The General Staff of the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, transferred a portion of its operations to underground bunkers in the vicinity of Ein Gedi, fearing the possibility of renewed strikes. These bunkers, designed to withstand significant impact, are now critical to maintaining essential operations. This series of events starkly revealed that Israel's long-held positioning as a technological superpower had been exposed as vulnerable. Iran effectively demonstrated its capability not only to intimidate but also to cripple the economic heart of its adversary. This novel model of exerting pressure, a direct assault on logistics, business, and investment reputation, caught the West by surprise, yet its effectiveness is undeniable. In light of these unsettling developments, international rating agencies have initiated a reassessment of Israel's credit rating. S&P and Fitch have already downgraded their outlook to negative, a move that could precipitate a surge in borrowing costs. The Israeli Ministry of Finance has issued a warning regarding a potential recession as early as the second quarter of 2025, while the export sector braces for a significant decline in orders, further compounding the economic woes. Therefore, the strategic ramifications of Tehran's attack have extended far beyond the military domain. The destruction, the palpable sense of panic, the pervasive fear, and the outflow of capital have laid bare a critical vulnerability within the Israeli model of resilience. Today, Tel Aviv is more than just a city where air raid sirens blared. It is a center that has forfeited its aura of invincibility, rendered vulnerable as never before. As the dust from the devastation began to settle, and as the residents of Israel began to return to the remnants of their shattered homes, it became painfully clear, the illusion of invincibility, which had long sustained the country's military and political elite, had been irrevocably shattered. The strikes on Tel Aviv, Bnei Brak, Ramel, Bat Yam, and Rishon LeZion vividly illustrated that, despite all the technological prowess and the colossal defense budgets, Israel remains susceptible to attack. The emotional impact of this realization was profound, shaking the very foundations of the nation's confidence. Israel is not merely vulnerable, it is fundamentally unprepared for a novel form of warfare. In this new paradigm, the adversary eschews conventional military tactics, opting instead to assail symbols, the economy, and the collective psyche. This shift represents a grave escalation, leaving many Israelis deeply unsettled. Indeed, analysts at the Begin Sadat Center, in their recent incisive report, have asserted that Iran's campaign has irrevocably reshaped the threat landscape in the Middle East. No longer content with merely intercepting drones in the desolate desert or engaging in sporadic skirmishes along the Gaza border, the adversary now strikes at the very heart of Israeli security. They are targeting the perceived invulnerability of its cities, the collective mindset of its society, and the bedrock confidence of its economy. The esteemed editor-in-chief of Yediot Aeronauts, in a poignant column dated June 28, lamented, "For decades, we have painstakingly constructed a formidable wall around ourselves, the Iron Dome, our intelligence apparatus, our diplomatic endeavors. Yet, this wall has failed to hold. Now, with missiles having breached its defenses, we are confronted with the stark realization that we lack a viable Plan B." The emotional impact of this realization on the Israeli populace cannot be overstated. Many perceive the attack on the nuclear facility in Bushehr, occurring during the delicate negotiations in Washington, as a fatal miscalculation. Defying the counsel of then-American President Donald Trump, the Netanyahu administration embarked on a path of escalation, perhaps presuming that Iran would either refrain from retaliation or offer only a tepid response. However, reality unfolded in a drastically different manner. Iran not only retaliated but did so with a precision, coordination, and magnitude that caught everyone off guard. The vaunted Iron Dome defense system proved inadequate. Evacuation protocols proved ineffective. Public services were woefully unprepared. For the first time in decades, citizens experienced a profound sense of vulnerability, realizing that the state's protection was not an inviolable guarantee but rather a conditional promise that could be broken at any moment. The psychological impact of this realization was devastating. This crisis has even infiltrated the ranks of the Israel Defense Forces, IDF, sparking internal dissent. Junior and mid-level commanders are now openly voicing criticisms of the General Staff's policies. Young officers are expressing apprehension that the political leadership is leveraging the army as a mere tool for exerting pressure, without providing the necessary strategic clarity and unwavering political backing. Soldiers on the ground are reporting critical shortages of equipment, obsolete air defense systems in border regions, and a pervasive sense of moral fatigue after 3 weeks of continuous mobilization. The situation is further compounded by the lack of clear strategic objectives, leaving soldiers feeling disillusioned and unsupported. Consequently, international media outlets are increasingly publishing headlines that would have seemed unthinkable just a month prior: the erosion of Israel's authority, the failure of the security architecture, the beginning of the end of hegemony in the region. Within Western analytical centers, discussions are cautiously emerging regarding the potential reevaluation of long-standing alliances, particularly in the context of the escalating influence of Gulf states, China, and even Turkey as alternative mediators in the peace process. This shift in perception represents a significant challenge to Israel's traditional role in the region. Meanwhile, Iran exhibits no indications of weakening or backing down. In June 2025, Israel found itself engulfed in the most profound crisis it had faced in decades, a maelstrom of geopolitical and societal upheaval. The strategic miscalculation of striking an Iranian nuclear facility amidst delicate diplomatic negotiations had unleashed a torrent of devastating consequences. Iranian ballistic missiles rained down upon the country's heartland, impacting densely populated areas such as Tel Aviv, Bat Yam, Ramat Gan, and Rishon LeZion. These strikes not only leveled buildings and crippled infrastructure but, more significantly, shattered the long-held Israeli illusion of invulnerability, sowing seeds of fear and uncertainty across the nation. The human cost was staggering: hundreds wounded, dozens perished, and billions of dollars in damages incurred. The economy teetered on the brink of collapse, and mass panic gripped the populace. Adding insult to injury, the vaunted Iron Dome defense system, once a symbol of Israeli technological prowess, proved tragically inadequate, allowing Iranian missiles to penetrate with alarming ease. The country, which had long prided itself on its impenetrable defenses, was caught completely off guard, leading to a profound crisis of confidence. The Netanyahu government found itself under intense scrutiny and criticism, facing a relentless barrage of questions about its strategic failures. Media censorship became increasingly prevalent as the government attempted to control the narrative, while international support for Israel began to wane noticeably. Moreover, the economic ramifications were equally devastating. A massive outflow of investment capital, coupled with paralyzed logistics and technological paralysis in Tel Aviv, delivered an economic blow comparable in its destructiveness to the missile strikes themselves. Conversely, according to reports from the New Arab, in Tehran, discussions were already underway to bolster partnerships with Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and even certain African nations. In his recent address, President Raisi proclaimed, "We have demonstrated that we will not be treated as a second-class nation. We are not a threat, we are a response," underscoring a defiant stance against perceived Western aggression and a commitment to regional influence. Perhaps the most unsettling aspect of the crisis was the palpable silence that permeated Israeli society. The shock of the Iranian strikes had left the nation reeling, and there was a distinct reluctance to return to normalcy. The once vibrant tourist districts of Tel Aviv stood eerily empty. Cafes and bars operated at half capacity, their usual buzz replaced by a somber quiet. Schools and universities shifted partially to remote learning, reflecting a deep-seated unease. The fear was not merely of further missile attacks, but of a more profound loss, a diminishing faith in the state's capacity to protect its citizens. A particularly poignant moment, symbolizing the end of an era, was captured in a drone video that circulated widely online. The footage depicted a ruined skyscraper in southern Tel Aviv, a stark testament to the devastation. The caption, "This is how illusions end," resonated deeply with viewers around the globe. The video quickly went viral, accumulating over 60 million views in a single day and becoming a powerful visual metaphor for a political and strategic miscalculation that Israel might struggle to overcome. Thus, as June 2025 drew to a close, Israel stood at a critical juncture in its history. The nation faced a stark choice: to continue down the path of escalation, risking a full-scale regional war, or to reassess its position and acknowledge that the era of unilateral dominance was over. Meanwhile, the world watched with bated breath, not necessarily concerned with who would emerge victorious, but with who would manage to survive in a new landscape of fear and vulnerability, where the illusion of absolute protection, whether on land or in the air, had been irrevocably shattered. It wasn't just the tangible threats that proved most perilous. For the first time, Israel confronted a chilling new paradigm. The enemy could now target not just military installations, but also inflict damage upon the very fabric of society. Indeed, they could erode public trust, tarnish business credibility, and destabilize the political landscape. Consequently, the illusion of absolute control, so long cherished, lay shattered into fragments. The nation now grapples with a profound question that extends far beyond a simple military riposte. Furthermore, it necessitates a comprehensive reevaluation of its entire survival strategy. This is crucial in an era where sheer dominance no longer guarantees security. The old certainties have evaporated, leaving a palpable sense of vulnerability and a pressing need to adapt to this disconcerting new reality. It is a time for deep introspection and the forging of a new path forward, one that acknowledges the multifaceted threats of the modern world.